it was an appetite for disaster. And this has even worsened over the last 12 months in the UK. But here's the problem. Because the stakes now are much higher, which saw a lot of people lose their jobs. It was supposed to be the return of an icon, the Volkswagen ID buzz, the buzz that defined a generation, electrified for the next. It had all the hype, it had the looks, and it had the legacy. But as of right now, production for the US market has been paused, suspended for the 2026 model, a vehicle that was meant to sell over 100,000 units a year, has barely shifted 6,000 units in the States. But this isn't just a VW story. You know, across the Atlantic here in the UK, something even more alarming is happening. Historic family-run dealerships, businesses that have survived recessions, pandemics, you know, companies that have been going for decades, are suddenly vanishing. A lot of them are going bust. Why? You know, today I'm going to be talking about this leisure vehicle crisis. I'm talking why some of the big name dealers and campervan converters have collapsed. Why manufacturers are quietly removing some features whilst also hiking the prices. And there is a new wave of vans from Korea and China that might just change the whole game. Let's start with the ID buzz. You know, when this was announced, the internet went crazy. The modern take of the original microbus. Arguably the most known van life vehicle of all time. You know, Volkswagen's Hanover plant was geared to build in huge numbers. But in the US, just over 6,000 units were sold in 2025. And that is a cause for concern. But why is it not selling? With all the nostalgia and the hype, VW assumed that we would all pay $65,000 just for the shape. And I have said before, I absolutely love the vehicle. I love how it looks. But for me and for others, that range just isn't enough. You know, the estimate is just over 270 miles. But when you fully load it up with all your camping gear, drive down a motorway, then real world, you could be looking less than 200 miles. And then there's the price. You know, it's in luxury vehicle territory. Plus, with the imposed tariffs, that nostalgia is going to be costing you quite a lot more. So, over there in the States, people have voted with their wallets. And the voting is a no. And that has led VW suspending the 2026 model year in America. You know, claiming that they're preparing for the revised 2027 model. There is currently far too much stock of the 2025 variant over in America. So if they didn't suspend the 2026 model year, then that surplus is just going to build and build. Which brings me back to the UK. You know, if you drive past leisure vehicle dealers today, campervans, motorhomes and caravans, you're going to see that they're absolutely rammed with stock. All of it is packed in there like sardines. And it may look like that's a successful business. Look at all those vans which they've got to sell. But that stock list could be a ticking time bomb. You know, we've seen huge family names collapse, family-run businesses that have traded for absolutely decades and are now no longer. You will have heard of some of them that have gone, but there are also others that have gone quite quietly under the radar, or that some have even been bought out by others because they just couldn't survive on their own. You know, here is one of the reasons why this has happened. During COVID, the demand spiked. Everybody wanted a campervan. We wanted to get away. We needed that campervan, a motorhome or a caravan. Dealers sold absolutely everything which they had. So they needed the manufacturers to produce some more vans. So the manufacturers ramped up the production and they did build as many as they possibly could. But with a short supply of base vehicles, increasing costs of raw materials and components, they were costly, a lot more costly to build. You know, production continued to increase. But by the time some of these vans were built and delivered in 2023, the market had changed. Interest rates had shot up. The cost of living crisis had hit. You, the customer, stopped buying. But the factory didn't stop. There was a huge amount of surplus stock. And couple that with a slowing demand as people were back to the overseas holidays, it was an appetite for disaster. The dealers had a lot of stock, but they needed to buy more. The way some manufacturers of leisure vehicles operate is by allocations. Each dealer will order the stock in advance, And this may be a set number of each specific van in each range. And if it's a manufacturer with a lot of range, loads of motorhomes, a load of camper vans and a load of caravans, then there could be quite a few variants. So even if you've just got to get one of each, that's going to be quite a lot. And perhaps for some dealerships, not all the vehicles in the range are going to be for the target market, meaning they may find it hard to sell certain models. So each year the dealer may need to buy lots of campervans, motorhomes and caravans for the new range, the New Year's range. So like this year, 2026 model. And that is great for the manufacturers, as they're always going to have that full order book. But for a dealer having to order lots of vehicles, essentially predicting the entire year of sales, it's not often easy, as we found out with 2024 as the sales dipped. Order too few and you've got an empty forecourt, but order too many and it can turn into a problem. Imagine you are that dealer, you order from the manufacturer as contracted to do so for 2024. Sales during the year slower than expected, and you've still got unsold 2023 models. The manufacturer calls you up, your new 2025 models are shipping to you next week. Stock is piling up, and this is what has been happening over the last few years. Now the problem part of this is the fact that the stock is placed on the dealer's credit line, which gives them a set period of time to pay for the stock, normally at 0% finance or maybe just very, very low. But here's the problem. Once that time has expired, those interest rates significantly increase, meaning that the vehicle is still on there, it's not been sold, and it's going to be costing you a lot more every day. The van is losing money every day for which it goes unsold. The more unsold stock which the dealer has accrued interest, that quicker those cash reserves are burned through. And this is why we can see some well-established businesses, drowning in those interest payments, and it can lead them to being insolvent. So manufacturers are forcing this stock onto dealers. But surely these new models must be better. They must have amazing new tech to justify the price increase, which generally it is over the previous year. Well, that might not even be the case as well. From some model years to the next, it could just be a colour change, perhaps a change of the upholstery. A van might have a slightly different sticker on the outside, possibly a colour edition, where they've got different coloured wheels and maybe a few different coloured accents across the van. Not really a big improvement over the previous year. I was once looking at a caravan and the new model year had, in my opinion, worse aesthetics than the outgoing year, and it also had downgraded spec. And this is what we're seeing now. Some models are actually going backwards. Manufacturers quietly removing features, giving vans a smaller leisure battery, a cheaper heater control panel, soft closed doors, completely gone. But yet the price is the same, or as we're quite often seeing, a lot higher. Always check that spec sheet. You might be paying more for less. And I always say it, and I will say it again more in a moment, you have to check. Manufacturers are looking to reduce the costs. We know the costs of practically everything have increased since COVID for lots of reasons which we're aware of. And that affects everything throughout this long chain. It's not the dealer that is fully responsible for the increase, nor the converter, and maybe not even the base vehicle manufacturer, as each of them have their own price challenges. Raw materials increase, energy costs, labour, transportation, and that is compounded each step during the process because they've all had this, and it reflects in each of their pricing. And this has even worsened over the last 12 months in the UK with the increases in the living wage and also national insurance, which saw a lot of people lose their jobs. Those changes have affected businesses on top of what were already there from the last few tough years which they've had. Campervan converters have also gone bust, and now to survive they are cutting corners. Well, some have been cutting corners for many, many years, which I will come on to. I've heard a story about a converter selling vans with practically zero profit just so he could keep the cash flowing and get his foot in the door in the market so he could one day grow. But it didn't work. He ended up having to close the business. I see vans regularly from companies trying to produce vans as cheap as they possibly can. They use cheaper pop-tops, poor quality kitchen units, basic heating controls. They carpet directly over the factory panels rather than actually replacing them with plywood. They don't insulate when most other converters do. And one big reason why you should is coming in a video very, very soon. Some companies use cheap tyres. They put screws in the side steps rather than actually replacing them with a suitable step. Inferior electrics, inferior gas. You know, I do not care what you actually buy. You know, in fact, you're probably going to be very surprised at what I've actually got coming soon. I just want you to know exactly what it is you're buying. You know, if you are buying that budget van, then you need to make sure that you are paying that budget price. Know when you are comparing two vans that you are comparing apples with apples. Are you comparing companies with actual real accreditations, VW qualified manufacturers, Ford Pro converters and the like? I want you to understand what you're buying, and more on that coming in a future video. Does this industry need to change? Do we need a proper rating system? Because right now that glossy Instagram page can quite easily hide that dangerous electrical install. Like I've showed before, and do watch out because I've got another shocking video coming soon with lots more examples. Some very frightening ones, in fact. Some which people are seeing on a daily basis. You know, the price of the vans now are absolutely crazy high. They are far more than they used to be. But it's the new normal. And we need to make sure that we're aware now more than ever that we know what we're looking at. Because the stakes now are much higher. You know, as people are finding out in the used market, buying mistakes which they've made, you know, back then, they're costing them now dearly. You know, when they come to sell, or even when they try and trade in, that part exchange might not be accepted. You know, budget vans aren't a problem, but it's actually selling the budget vans at premium prices. That's what the problem is. You need to know what you're buying. If you've got a budget van, brilliant. If you've paid a budget price, not a problem at all. But because of these price increases which we're getting on a lot of these vans, there are some companies now who are bringing out budget ranges. I know that there's some larger camper vans coming out and motorhomes which are going to be far better placed than the higher price ones. They're just going to be taking out components which have been included in the past. It's probably going to be a bit like the Sprite. I mean, I had a Sprite caravan, and that was kind of like the lower end of the market as far as the Swift was concerned. But I knew that when I was buying it, that this is the budget, and I could have got the Challenger, I think it is. But actually, that was right for me, and I paid that budget price for it. And that's what it's about. I knew what I was buying. I was informed. I knew. And that's what I went for. And we're also seeing now, you know, lower price base vans, you know, alternatives to the Volkswagens and the Fords and the Mercedes. There is a spectrum of choice out there. And that is going to be widening even more as newer vans come to the market. I mentioned that Kia PV5 in a recent video, and that it's being seen as a direct competitor to the ID Buzz, much cheaper. And I'm going to view it with an open mind because although that the initial impressions, I don't particularly like the look of it, but it might be much better in the flesh. And it'll definitely have a different price tag. It won't be carrying that premium type price tag. So maybe it might have an impact as an electric camper. Watch this space, that will be coming hopefully in the next few months. And then there's also the Chinese brands that have been rumoured to be coming over here for a while. And some of these have been at the Dusseldorf show for the last few years. And the prices can be, well, how can you describe it? Aggressive? Slightly aggressive pricing against what you're seeing in the other European brands. What they'd actually be in reality by the time you've added all the various different bits and pieces which you'd need to might be a different story. But it's another possible hurdle that, you know, the long-standing big brands are going to have coming down the road. So today we're in a place where manufacturers need to keep manufacturing, dealers need to keep selling, and we need to keep buying. But we are not in a perfect world. And with all these prices being at the level we are, you know, we need to understand and look carefully at what we're committing to. Take your time, research properly, understand what it is which you're looking at. Take the time to consider all that sales patter which is being thrown at you. Is that approved manufacturer actually verified as being approved or qualified? Is the documentation to show that the gas installation has been done properly? The crash testing of the beds and the pop tops? Are you buying a brand new model, or is it older stock? Have you even driven that 6-metre motorhome that you're about to sign that dotted line on? Or perhaps you should take it for a test drive first. Can you operate the vehicle? Can you move the bed? Can you close the pop top? How long is the vehicle warranty? Does the warranty of the conversion match the same vehicle warranty? What is the vehicle registered as on the V5 logbook? Can you even afford the van? Or would you be better off looking at something in a different price range? That's exactly what I've done. We don't need expensive vans like I spoke about last week. We don't need them, but yes, they are there if we want them and can afford them. But with these more expensive vans, there are lots of considerations, and I'm going to cover lots of those in more detail soon. There's a lot to think about, and there's also lots of choice, and it's making that right choice for you. My choice will be different to yours, but to help with those choices, I have a whole series of videos coming up, plus my new van, which is going to be here sooner than you think. You certainly won't believe the price of that, so do look out for that. Might even be next week. And I'm also going to be bringing you lots of new vans this year and seeing companies that I've never seen before. Where are you on your campervan, motorhome and caravan journey? Are you buying? Are you selling? Or just browsing? Let me know what your thoughts are. And see here why a 500 quid van might be better than that £100,000 van. Thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you soon.